Welcome back. It is day 35 for the government shutdown, tying the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Democrats still refusing to vote yes on a clean continuing resolution, but offering their own costly proposals instead. At least two lawmakers have already told us they are expecting government to reopen this week. Ted Cruz, as well as Tom Cole, who I just spoke with, say that the Democrats are waiting for Election Day to pass, and that is when they will open government. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget reporting the Democrats' plan to reopen government would be the costliest in U.S. history. The Congressional Budget Office finding a 4-week shutdown will cost the economy $7 billion and up to $14 billion if it stretches to 8 weeks. Joining me now is the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, Maya MacGuineas. Maya, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I've been getting nervous recently because I think when you're talking about air traffic control calling in sick, working without pay, TSA agents not on the job, people worried if traveling is safe, and you see a shutdown in travel, that's when the rubber hits the road for the broader economy. The fourth quarter is going to obviously see a serious impact. What is your reaction to all of this?
Well, I think the first point to make is that it is really dangerous how we are getting used to government shutdowns.
Yeah.
This is the most, it's stupid. It's juvenile, it's stupid, and it's kind of an own goal against the country when we are really in the moment where two parties are so much more intent on messaging wars with each other rather than running the government. Really a problem. But second, as you point out, the problem with this right now is that the concentration of the harm is really falling on very small groups of people, and it's quite dangerous. So people who are not getting paid, people who are not getting benefits that they need, and when it comes to safety, there's obviously real threats. This is not something we should be playing with. This is not how we should be negotiating about policy differences. And yet we're stuck here in basically the longest government shutdown we've ever seen. It's a discouraging reflection of both the government and our ability to budget.
It is disgraceful. I assume we're going to get the Bureau of Labor Statistics major data dump once the government reopens. We'll get a lot of data at once. The Congressional Budget Office is estimating that the U.S. deficit, though, will reach $1.8 trillion for the current fiscal year. The deficit right now at $1.7 trillion. The national debt, of course, recently passed $38 trillion. Maya, this is all costing money every day.
It's costing money. We're paying many people to do work that they're not doing. The uncertainty is terrible for the economy. Yes, this is a wet blanket on an economy that's already struggling as we're trying to navigate between inflation that's higher than we want and growth and employment in many sectors that's lower than we want. So this is not an easy time for the economy. Some things look great. Some things are big warning signals, and we should be navigating how to strengthen the economy. The first step, of course, is how to strengthen our overall fiscal situation, which, as you said, the Congressional Budget Office and, frankly, every expert that looks at this continues to warn we are borrowing way too much, looking at a future of borrowing $2 trillion a year with no end in sight.
Now, Maya, the other very important event to discuss this morning is certainly the Supreme Court hearing on President Trump's emergency use of tariffs. And you have written about this, that a tariff repeal needs replacement to avoid more borrowing. What's your take on the president using the emergency for tariff and the Supreme Court hearing this Wednesday? What are the implications should it go the wrong way?
So this is huge. Listen, the first thing about tariffs is that they serve numerous purposes, and people are going to disagree about whether they're good or bad, but they can be a useful foreign policy tool. They may be have negative effects on the economy, certainly in the short term. And as we've seen, they can be very positive fiscally. These tariffs are generating huge amounts of monthly income compared to what we would have had otherwise, and offsetting the very large cuts of the tax, the large costs and borrowing costs of the tax cuts that we just had. So this is potentially trillions of dollars. If it's ruled illegal, and I have no legal expertise, but I do know that this amount of money, when it's being budgeted, should go through Congress. You want to have Congress buy-in when you're making major structural changes to the budget. But if they suddenly lose this amount of revenue, we need to find a replacement for it. There have been good ideas out there about other revenues that could raise it. We could go back to finding offsetting cuts in spending. We haven't made much progress there at all. But if we suddenly lose what potentially could have been $2.5–3 trillion in revenue over the coming decade, that's going to be a major hit for the budget. And there should be a plan B that I wish our lawmakers were working on instead of fighting about a government shutdown.
Now, I know that President Trump has backups. I mean, I think they're talking about clarity on the 232 section and the 301 pharma investigation, the 301 China Phase 1 investigation. There's these transshipments tariffs as well, 40% transshipment. So I think that the president has backups should it go the wrong way. But what you're saying is that it makes sense for Congress to reassert taxing power here and come up with replacements. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, one, there's a question whether the backups will be able to generate as much revenue. But really, more fundamentally, you want there to be congressional buy-in to policies. One of the problems we've had, and you saw this with things like the Biden administration doing student debt forgiveness. But if you have just the president acting unilaterally, then there's no congressional support or buy-in for certain policies. And we go to this terrible pendulum swing of back and forth where one president's going to do something, the next president's going to repeal it. Congress sits there basically doing nothing. That's not how we're meant to run the government. And so I think it's really important that we have a revenue base that's sufficient to support the spending that we are engaged in. And while I do think that the president is looking at alternatives, if the Supreme Court rules this down, I don't see there being nearly enough effort in Congress to figure out how they're going to reconcile the structural problems in the budget. In fact, you'll notice Congress doesn't even pass full budgets each year. That's part of the reason we're in the problem we are in right now. So they need to get back to that fundamental responsibility of passing a budget every year. And one I would argue that has a reasonable fiscal goal rather than borrowing so much.
That would be a good goal. Maya, thank you very much. We'll be watching. That is the job, presenting the budget. Thank you so much, Maya MacGuineas.